So I'm going to introduce MC, and I'm going to disappear. By the way, there is another stage in 145, 146, so if you're interested in that piece of presentation, you can just move ahead over there. All right, Gabe.
Thank you. So very excited to introduce the first set of action clusters for the Ag and Rural Supercluster. So please stay here, especially if you don't know what the heck a supercluster or action cluster is. And we will shed light on that with some very specific projects that are very exciting and are bridging the rural-urban boundaries. First up, without further ado, I'll play timekeeper. Each of these action clusters has 10 minutes to give their kind of pitch, their overview in a more detailed fashion. I'm going to introduce Gene Rice, broadband specialist and connector extraordinaire with the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. Gosh, NTIA, amazing, I remember that. Department of Commerce, so she's been instrumental in this cluster and moving us along. So great first presenter to hear from. Welcome, Gene.
Thank you, Gabe. Let's see, can we get the next slide? Okay. Anyway, it's a pleasure to work with Gabe. He's working diligently in California, working on innovation in smart ag at Super. I also want to take the opportunity to thank Wilf Pinfold and Skip Newberry for all their work on the Tech Jam and all the local team, and I want to thank them all for all of us for moving forward on this. My goal today is just to tell you a little bit as kind of what NTIA as a partner does and what kind of work we're doing in the whole smart cities arena. One of the first things that we do is we're working on expanding broadband throughout the United States. We were part of that task force for rural prosperity, and that came out with a big initiative in broadband. We are now working with the USDA and their broadband leaders around the country to try to see how we can move the needle forward in that area. We are also looking at smart cities development. We work closely with GCTC. We do try to connect the parties we meet and see not just the superclusters we're kind of helping, but all of them to try to see how we can make things work and work better. We're taking a look at the federal spectrum, and this is really important since we're going to have in 2025 something like 30 to 50 billion sensors out there, and we're going to have to share spectrum. And so what NTI is working on really high, and we just had a big announcement last week about it, is we're working at dynamic spectrum sharing with the federal government spectrum. As you know, federal government spectrum has the most spectrum in the U.S., and so we see the need to share, and we're working on it. We're also working with DoD, and particularly the Navy, on how to share their spectrum as well. So I do see great things coming in that area. Also, ITS, which is our technical and science area that's in Boulder, they are working on kind of a unique project where they're just starting to do a project on how to model smart cities so you can see how the technology is going to work, and they're working with the city of Denver as their key, and they're also working with the Boulder University and the city of Boulder. So I think that's going to be kind of a nice microcosm. We're going to end up with a test bed and hopefully something we can all use as we go forward. Obviously, Internet of Things is huge for us and has been for a long time. We have a policy group that works heavily on this, and one of the things they have done is a multi-stakeholder group to work on cybersecurity and privacy, and I'm happy to say they're working with Scott and with Lan on moving forward with that particular project. So it's a terrific one as we go forward. So we have, and we're just super excited about all the kinds of things we're doing, but all the way through it, we're taking a look at how do we support local governments, municipalities, and businesses for innovation, economic development, and the whole host of things that are near and dear to the heart of commerce as we go forward. The group I work for at NTIA is called BroadbandUSA, and what we do is a whole number of things to try to promote broadband and the next stages for smart cities. One of the things we do is we provide technical assistance. So, for example, I provide technical assistance to several states on trying to look at how do they look at funding and going forward in the broadband, as well as what can they then do with smart cities and what do they need to do as they go forward. We also do education. We do some training seminars around the country, and we also do convenings of various kinds. Sometimes doing it with League of Cities, sometimes doing it with different kinds of organizations and stakeholder groups. I do recommend, you'll see at the end, but you can become a member of our newsletter, and it has every month a lot of great information on smart cities and on broadband and kind of what's happening around the country, and mostly through links. The key for us is to look at what the goals are. You know, we don't want to do top down. We're trying to look at how you do it from bottom up. And I think many of you who are doing smart cities are looking at some of these various goals. So for example, one of the things we worked on last year was the public Wi-Fi with the wireless supercluster. One of the reasons we worked on that was because we felt that it was very important to make sure that smart cities were inclusive. So let me give you an example of that. San Mateo County implemented public Wi-Fi in a rural area. They did it to kind of close the homework gap because people there really couldn't afford to have their kids be online, and they didn't want them to have to, sit, and with that lag. So they did it, and it just took off. I mean, and what also happened is there's a big migrant area in the region. They all came in to have their kids do their homework and to use it for their own purpose. Turned out to be a huge economic boom for the area. Then comes to say there was a big disaster, and they were the only network that was up. So they were able to help first responders and everyone else. So what it does is it says, okay, they found a problem, they worked on it, and lo and behold, more has come from it, and now they're doing doing different IoT projects with it. Like the city of Boston, they did open data with a hackathon. One of the things was, how do we deal with transportation data? They said, okay, what is the community need? The community says, hey, we can't tell when our kids get home on the buses. We don't know where they are if they're late. So community hackers came up with an app so that now they can see where their bus is for their kids. So I mean, it's all about the goals and how do we work all together, I think from all levels of government and with industry and with universities and nonprofits on how to go forward in all of these areas. NTI tries to do multi-collaboration within the federal side and also within the areas of states and also local governments. So one of those is, just kind of the state. We have a state broadband network where we work with all kinds of states, and they come together just to talk on a monthly basis, and then we work with individual states as they go forward on various initiatives as they go forward. We are happy to be a part of the NIDARD Smart Cities and Communities Task Force. Chris Geer is the co-chair of that particular group. And that group is all the federal agencies who have a foot in the smart city area, like Department of Transportation, DHS, ITE, others. And they're all looking at, okay, how do we help support all of the goals? NSF works on it. How do we work? For example, NSF did a major analysis of what kind of research is needed in the rural area last year, and that report just came out. And so we're all trying to work together to see what we can do to promote these kind of processes as we go forward. I mentioned the State Broadband Leaders Network. We also have a number of toolkits and things that are available on broadband and planning and partnerships. And I'm a little biased because I wrote several of those, or at least a principal offer on several of those, but I would suggest that you take a look at our resources as you go through. And then, of course, we work with the Global Cities Team Challenge, which I think is one of the most outstanding innovation and multi-sector projects in the federal government. As you've heard, we've launched the Ag and Rural Supercluster. We're with NIST on that, and we're very happy to see Gabe, Sean, and others really working on how to make that happen. And we want to make life better for farmers, more productive, for ranchers so they can find their cattle. I mean, you've probably heard that there are now kind of like dog collars for animals on the range so they can track them and see where they are, and they don't have to kind of, gallop through the fields to find them. They can actually find them that way. And then we also say it's an ecosystem. So you can't just look at the farm. You have to say, okay, how does that work within that community? Because that whole community needs to be a vibrant community. And so telehealth is turning to be a big area that we're looking at. We're also, and we've got a number of these projects that we had mentioned earlier, so I don't want to take a huge amount of time to talk about the projects, but I do see a great deal of interesting things develop from it, and then we can hopefully gain best practices. So some of the one-offs where you have a rural provider who's done a great job working with all of the senior citizens and the various kind of projects that they might be working on or the buildings that they're in. how do we replicate then for other places so that they can then also, we've got wearables for aging, how do we handle diabetes, all of those kind of things in the healthcare things that we're looking at, and those are action clusters around those topics that are being developed right now. So the hope will be that, if you're out there and you're thinking about some things that you're interested in or your community's interested in, you could work with this on this. As we mentioned earlier, what we're going to try to do is kind of develop different action clusters, and we see them forming. They take a little time to form, but as we get forward, we're going to look at each of these areas, kind of rural, telehealth, and ag. Clearly, they're going to overlap with many of the other superclusters, so we're going to work on coordination in that. But the goal is for us to kind of see where the problems are and how we can use smart tech. And we've had a great amount of interest by the startup community as well as kind of ongoing people in this industry, whether it's telehealth or providers in those areas. And it's one area I think it's kind of exciting because, I may have said it before, but it is not a given that, these smart techs are going to make it to the rural areas in any degree. So this is a way we're hoping that we can help move that to make it an actual project, and we can look at whether, we're all talking about regions. The question is, what size a region makes it sustainable? How do we go forward? So we're working on that. We worked on the GCT, setting up the wireless supercluster. Super delighted with the blueprint that came out. We have a number of cities that have used it. Centennial, Colorado is the latest. We also have HUD, which has been looking at, putting in public housing, putting their Wi-Fi in the public housing. So they have used this, and we've done a webinar for them. And my time is almost up. All right. We're now starting Smart Building Action Cluster with Limor Schaefer, and we'll be talking about that later. And I just want to mention we're working with a lot of states on smart state initiatives. Virginia is one. We've got the state of Illinois, another. We're looking at the Department of Health, who's working with this supercluster. Georgia, which basically through Georgia Tech has come forward and done some amazing kind of challenge to try to get all sectors participating in Georgia-based projects. So I just want to mention that, do use us as a resource if you need to connect or you want some information or you want to hear about some of the works that we're doing. But what I'm really excited about is kind of what you're doing and how we might be able to help. Thank you very much.